Move your money securely from one country to another, CD and US dollar. With Leatherback, you can move money anytime, anywhere. Simply sign up, verify your identity, and you're ready to add money to your account. Leatherback is licensed in 4 countries, and with full visibility of your cash flow via our dashboard, you're in control. One access, one platform, one world. Download the Leatherback app and let the journey begin.
Africa, the show that is designed for us to have a space to discuss all issues pertaining to us here in the diaspora and also across the continent of Africa. It's always a pleasure to come your way. And before we proceed any further, just a bit of housekeeping. We are streaming live on Facebook on My Channel 7. Of course, if you're watching us on Sky, it is Channel 181. You can also download the app, all right? Channel 7 app and follow us. We've also got you covered if you like to close your eyes and imagine things. We've got you covered on radio. It is GN Radio, so make sure you listen to us. And whilst you're there, make sure you share, all right? We want to hear your take. I keep saying this. This show is designed for us to have a dialogue. It's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. And I know that sometimes politics, even though this is a current affairs show, politics tend to turn people off. But my suggestion to you is don't be turned off, don't be alarmed, because if you don't get involved, politicians will make policies that will have an impact on you one way or the other. You might think you're in the diaspora, so you're okay. If you look at the economic challenges, that's what's happened. A lot of countries see currency have depreciated massively. And of course, it's had an impact on you. So make sure you get involved. Now, on today's show, controversy of Qatar is still very much alive. England and Wales, including other 5 European teams, were looking to wear an armband in support of the LGBT community. FIFA, in return, said players will be sanctioned if they decide to go ahead. So we're asking today, has football become a political tool? And secondly, a lot of people in the diaspora would love to go back and help. Again, we're asking, what is the role of the diaspora in nation building across respective countries? Plus, in the midst of the economic challenges facing each and every country, how can countries across the continent of Africa bounce back? And joining us to discuss this, we have Kofi Anku. Kofi Anku is the CEO of Mekri Estates. Thank you for joining us, Kofi.
Thank you for the invitation.
And also Julius Baluto, editor of Informer East Africa and also journalist. Thank you for joining us.
Always pleasure.
All right. Now, let's begin with today's show. We begin with Qatar. A lot has been said. Qatar has been criticized. There's been backlash. Nevertheless, the game still goes on. There are a lot of people who are saying they will not watch the game due to Qatar's bad human rights record. But some other people are also enjoying the game. With all the backlash against Qatar, the president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, had a few words to say. Let's take a quick listen.
Today I feel Qatari. Today I feel Arab. Today I feel African. Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled. Today I feel a migrant worker. Here in Qatar as well. Of course, there are still things that don't work and that need to be addressed. But this moral lesson giving, one-sided, it's just hypocrisy.
So that was the president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino there. But we also went out, okay, we spoke to a few people to hear their take on all this, you know, the saga surrounding Qatar. Let's take a quick listen to what they had to say as well.
To be honest, because we've got a recurring pattern of major sports events being held in countries that really, they just use them to bolster their own reputation. And it's a similar pattern that we've been seeing since the Olympics were held in Germany during World War II, where it's a situation of these countries holding these events whilst having committed horrible acts against groups of people, and it just being ignored for the sake of the sports. I mean, it happened with Russia during the last World Cup because of the fact that Russia had annexed Crimea, I think it was. And it's happening again with Qatar because of all the migrant workers that have died during the construction of the stadiums, as well as all the blatant homophobia, whilst, I mean, the ambassador, David Beckham, has always claimed to be someone who fought for gay rights and LGBT rights and things like that. So there's a hypocrisy in people like that, then also sort of investing in these events. But I think that's also, it's just a product of the world at the moment and the very sort of neoliberal aspects of society at the moment, because it's people willing to try and increase their own reputation by seeming progressive, whilst also not having an issue with filling their pockets from places that really aren't ethical.
It doesn't really make sense that Qatar should be hosting the World Cup, because it's a tiny country and there are loads of countries which have far bigger populations, which have a much bigger football following. So it would seem to me that there must be some geopolitical reason that that decision was made. I mean, at what level and why, I don't know. I expect it's got to do with oil, but I don't know. But it does seem very odd that they should be chosen, you know, when there are loads of huge footballing countries that didn't get the vote.
I think I'll begin with you first, Julius. Last week we had this discussion here, quite heated actually, from the feedback I got. But looking at it, you know, looking at a bit more of the nuance within this whole saga that's happening with Qatar now.
I would still support the sentiments of the FIFA chairman, because at the end of the day, he mentioned something very important, that if it was about this being an issue right now, then the Western world should be able to apologize for the next 3,000 years for the things they've done in the past. Let's have something in context here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing is that when you talk about LGBT community, if they didn't have to make noise, no one would be bothered. That's a very controversial statement for me to make. But if you just go back, it's not Qatar, it's everywhere. Yeah. If it was okay in the West, they wouldn't be fighting for recognition. See the point? And let me give you an example. Not long ago, a couple of years back, the Church of England in the US was split because of appointing the first gay bishop. This is America. Even in the UK also, it just started to happen not long ago. If you flash back, you go to those days, early days, it wasn't like acceptable. Even if you look into the legislative process in the UK, it's been evolving. Sometimes to have the right to be gay used to be many years, and it kept on being reduced. So why is it that people have to always have to lord it over others? I'm saying lord it over others because there are so many discriminated groups of people. Talk about the blacks. In the UK, we saw the death of George Floyd, sports people taking the knee. So why are they not taking the knee in Qatar? So I'm just trying to say that this shouldn't be an issue. Football is not politics, yeah? And if you let a game just be a game, anyone watches games with no controversy. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who you are. If anywhere you go, no one will say, don't watch a game because you are that way or the other way. And therefore, these people are just making noise when it's not really necessary. Let's also contextualize this. I'm not trying to support human rights violations. I'm not saying I'm the ambassador of Qatar, that they are cool and the rest of the world is wrong. No, there are things that have to be changed, but the same can be said in every other country you go to. Come to the UK. We still want more rights. Yeah, I want the right to pay cheaper in shops, but have not been granted yet.
I mean, let me come to you here, Kofi. Yes, I mean, we're asking, has football become a political tool? If you look at the game the other day, Iran against England, we've seen the demonstration that's been happening in Iran, a young girl. And the Iranian players took it upon themselves not to sing their national anthem. So again, trying to make that is a political stance. And football, we've been told that football is autonomous, and as such, shouldn't interfere, politics shouldn't interfere with football. So here we are. So if England, using this game to push for the voices of the LGBT community to be heard, and also migrant workers who died building the stadium, then surely, you know, it's a platform to raise awareness.
Absolutely. Jones, I think we have to contextualize football in the wider history of sport.
Sure.
And sport has always been a reflection of society and a place where huge social problems have been worked out in the public eye, often prior to the legislative process. So we saw that a lot in the US, where you integrated baseball with figures like Jackie Robinson. And that really was leading the way to a wider conversation about race in America. So I don't think it's ever just sport.
Yeah. Okay. You can watch us live on Facebook. We're streaming live on Facebook, okay? Make sure whilst you're there, you share. Send your comments on there, and I'll put your questions as well to my guests here. If I can answer your questions, of course, I will answer your questions. But make sure you do. We like to interact with our viewers. But on the issue of, you know, players wearing armband in support of the LGBT community, are we... Because listen, I spoke about this today on my show, my breakfast show this morning, where I felt like it was probably towards the LGBT community as opposed to migrants who died working, you know, on the ground, the stadium, the beautiful stadium that we're all enjoying the football being. And it almost looks as if this is the narrative, not necessarily about immigrants. You know, I made this assertion this morning that on one hand, the UK is pointing, I'll talk about the UK because we're here in the UK. They're pointing finger at Qatar. Just a few days ago, we had the Home Secretary saying that Britain is on the brink of invasion from migrants. And there is this nastiness towards migrants here in the UK. So if the UK is preaching and pointing fingers at Qatar, surely it ought to look at itself as well.
I always say if you live in glass house, don't be the first one who throws the stone, especially from inside your house, you know. Because the thing is that there's so many examples. We've seen during the campaign for Brexit, we saw how nasty it got. I'll never forget this BBC journalist with a daughter walking on the street being chased. Say, what are you doing here? Because she was black. We voted for people like you to disappear. So this is happening on the ground in the UK. So why are they pointing fingers at Qatar, you see? And also the other thing I always say is that whichever country you go, there's laws that are there. And you cannot force people to change their laws or tilt them to favor your laws, because they are your laws, they are their laws. You are bound with them.
But then, Julius, I know you're a libertarian, right? You believe in the rule of law. You believe in the, you know, individual liberties, right? And as somebody who is an advocate for people to demonstrate, right? For people to demonstrate to their views so that they get some sort of recognition. Isn't the World Cup the best place, the best event to actually bring attention to what has been happening in Qatar, in their own backyard?
If we have to go down that road, everything becomes political, and there's a society we lose things that we can enjoy. Listen, if I have a favorite singer, if I've gone to the stadium to listen to their music, I don't want no one coming holding a placard of lower the prices of fuel. That's a different conversation. There's time and place for everything.
Julius, I'm not sure who you've been listening to, but the history of music, the people who we spend a lot of money to listen to rock concerts, they're political. The reason why we're going is because they've got a message of inspiration, of hope, looking for change. This is what we look for to sport. This is what we look for to the arts. So I think the idea of depoliticizing entertainment, this is where these
I'm trying. We're on the brink of hijacking everything. Like now, this controversy, we haven't seen the great news that Saudi Arabia beat Argentina. That's unusual. We should be enjoying that moment of seeing a weaker team beating a giant. It's like David versus Goliath story. Yeah. But that disappears because we're talking about arms bans for LGBT. The goodness of sport will dissipate at the back burner if we allow all this activism to take preeminence.
People have been celebrating that victory all over the world.
Exactly.
Have been surprised by that stunning defeat.
Yeah, and that gives me hope. I'm like David, I'm not that big guy. If I play, I know there's chance for people like me. Yeah, but if you force me to wear a band, I'm like, what is it for?
I mean, watching the pundits, and I think this probably be the last part of this conversation, listening to the pundits, the likes of Roy Keane coming out saying, look, Qatar should have never hosted the World Cup in the first place. And if I remember, if my memory serves me right, I think this was the time when FIFA there was an event where whoever was next in line to host the World Cup was being held. And I think England, the delegates of FIFA had promised England their votes. And so you had the likes of Prince William, David Beckham, Alan Shearer, big prominent people who attended the event, looking to bring football back home, as it were. And unfortunately, they were overlooked and gave it to Qatar. Do you think it's just purely sour grapes from England? Because they claim to be the home of football. And Qatar, not really much known about Qatar other than what they claim as, Qatar is a Gulf state that indulges in primitive policies, and their culture, the quote-unquote, is primitive. So it's just because we get a lot of media bashing, especially from here.
Sure.
Think that's fair?
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of issues at play when you're looking at a country like Qatar. How did they get the World Cup? FIFA has had its share of concerns around corruption and whatnot. So I think there are always going to be questions. And I think, the point you make about people in glass houses, on some level, it's good. You want to hear the UK talking about human rights, because that's what we use to nail them, right? When they have a full-throated support of migrants, and then we can see that they're not living up to the whatever song they're singing, right? We're looking, if they were to say, you know what, we're not interested in human rights, we're not interested in historical wrongs, we're not interested in social change, we don't have a lot of leverage in that conversation. So.
All right. Keep watching. Keep sending your comments. I will read your questions, so do send them in. This issue, I don't think is going anywhere. It's very divisive. A lot of people are not watching the game because of what has been said about Qatar. But for me, as a football person, I will watch the game. I'll continue watching it. Now, that doesn't mean that I condone what is being said or done in Qatar. That's not the case at all. But we must move on, okay? And we're moving on to our next subject. And here we are. There's a global economic challenges facing each and every country. So we've been made to believe. But when it comes to the continents, across the continent of Africa, the situation seems much more dire. How can African countries bounce back from the economic challenges?
It's a question of
Jermaine. That is the question. Let's hear your take on it. And I'll come to you first, Kofi.
Well, I think that there are always opportunities and challenges. So when you're looking at a situation like we face in Ghana, where we've had massive issues with the currency, it creates an opportunity to have a conversation about the kind of governance we want, what are our priorities. There's always opportunities in crises. And oftentimes when it's business as usual, even if there are things going on that are unseemly or that we're not too excited about, it's hard to make that change. I think that there's the tenor and the mood in Ghana is far more receptive to different ideas. So that's encouraging.
What about you, Julius?
Yeah, I always remember George W. Bush, the senior, one time at the heat of their soldiers being beaten in Somalia, he quickly called them back and he said something I'll never forget. Challenges don't come to challenge us. Challenges come to make us strong. It's true, because look at Africa now. The only way is to pick up Africa from where we are and move on. Whatever happened, happened. We can't stay there. So there's a lot of unexploited potential. And during the lockdown, during COVID, I used to say it's a moment of rethink. It's a moment to stop and step back and look forward, so that when we come back, we don't come back the same way we were. We come back having learned lessons, lots of lessons of the past. Having as Africa, there's many things that are so instructive. Think about the distribution of COVID vaccine globally. Think about what happened, how Africa realized that we are on our own. Think about Eve, actually. Were it not for God saving Africa, the idea was every African man or woman will be falling down for lack of medication. That is a moment of thinking and thinking forward, like self-reliance in all aspects, and also the global system being changed to end monopoly of some of the things that are not good for monopoly.
And that's my next question, because you're talking about change. And because we're all interconnected, any impact in the global economy has an adverse, serious effect across the continent of Africa. And I just want us to look at this. A, is it possible to change? B, if not, what is the alternative?
I think we're dead in the water if we don't believe that change is possible.
Okay.
And so I think if we look at what we have gone through as Kenyans, as Ghanaians, as Nigerians, facing down the British Empire, I think that we have a history of resistance and resilience, and we have a level of connectivity and broad-based education and wealthy diaspora. We've got tools at our disposal that we haven't seen in 500 years. So this clearly is not a time to be pessimistic.
And if I may ask, because a lot of discussion has been centered around the IMF. Here in the UK, the government is saying that it's not a matter of borrowing, but cutting public spending and also raising taxes. And I'm sure across the continent of Africa, it's a different issue there. You have countries that, the tax net is not wide enough, and so there is deficit, and as such, governments have to borrow. But looking at this scenario and how majority of countries find themselves, what could actually happen? Is IMF the key?
I don't think there's a country in the world that's developed off the back of its relationship with IMF.
Okay. Elaborate.
Nobody, no single individual prospers because of getting more loans and more loans.
But that seems to be the trajectory of many economies across the continent of Africa.
What I advocate for is self-reliance. A few years ago, especially 2006, I did a very good, well-researched documentary. The title was The Wrongs in Africa Today. And I explored the role of World Bank and IMF on Africa's economy.
Okay.
Number one, if you remember, extremely paternalistic to the level that IMF and the World Bank loans, they used to come with preconditions attached.
Okay, and there are preconditions attached to this show. When I'm told to go on a break, Julius, I need to listen and go on a break. This is Talk Africa. We're taking a quick break and we'll be back right after this.
That's right.
I'm so hungry. This aroma to kill me.
Grandpa?
Go and get Grandpa's dinner.
Okay.
Whether you're looking for poundo in your crayfish stock or proper seasoning or any other ingredient, Tropical Sun has everything you need.
Hey, no. Take the pounded yam. My strong young man.
My hero.
Hey.
I think Mommy's a real hero.
Add flavors of the world to your table.
Leatherback helps you move your money securely from one country to another with ease. With over 20 currencies to choose from, including Indian rupee, naira, Ghanaian cedi, and US dollar, with Leatherback you can move money anytime, anywhere. Simply sign up, verify your identity, and you're ready to add money to your account. Leatherback is licensed in 4 countries, and with full visibility of your cash flow via our dashboard, you're in control. One access, one platform, one world. Download the Leatherback app and let the journey begin.
Welcome back to the program. We are streaming live on Facebook, my channel 7. So do go on there and leave your comments on there. We're also streaming on GN Radio. If you like to listen and visualize our discussion here, you can go on to TuneIn or www.gnradio.co.uk and join the conversation. And just before we went on the break, if you just tuned in, we're talking about the economic challenges affecting the entire globe and how countries across the continent of Africa can bounce back. So Julius, I'll come back to you because I did interject to go on the break.
Yeah, that's okay. I was talking about my research, my documentary, which won some awards, The Wrongs in Africa Today. So I explored the role of the IMF and the World Bank. And I want to just choose one typical example that, like former president of Kenya, Daniel Arap Moi, this one time he was tired of IMF giving preconditions to their loans, and he said no. The moment he said no, the management of World Bank had to go to Nairobi to convince him to accept. Because then if he said no, the rest of African presidents say no, then there's no business. In essence, IMF, World Bank is not a grant. They are loans you have to pay back. And one of the most interesting findings I came across was that whenever some African countries rejected the loans from IMF and the World Bank, the same institutions, I even interviewed the person who regulates these banks, the same institution would change that as a financial product and sell it to the same countries in a different way. What I'm trying to say, if an institution, financial institution, has the power to tell you, adapt democracy, introduce structural and adjustment projects, and they're not good for your country and for your economy, that's too much power. What in essence should be the case, every African president aspiring to lead his people, come, get into the power, inspire your people, be productive locally, inspire these people to be productive locally so that the country will be self-reliant. Yes, I know the interconnection of the world, you have to keep on financial institution, you have to borrow this and that, but if it can be minimized, even the best thing for Africa. So does Africa have the chance? I'm from Kenya. I was there in October. Kenya has come with the best financial mobile transfer in the world. They lead in the world. I'll go to the shops, I'll make purchases using my mobile phone. Even if I lose my mobile, I don't lose my money because the system is so strong. I can send money to a different individual, which I did twice by mistake because I mixed up the numbers. But all I had to do was to copy that transaction, send it to the central mechanism, and in a minute they refund your money. So you don't even lose it. This is the future that we are talking about. This is Africa. It's happening, African innovation. So there's so much potential that if it's harnessed by governments, we will never need to borrow.
And just going off what Julius just said, and if we look at Ghana, for instance, the level of products that is imported into the country. Now, this is an area, not just Ghana, but across the entire continent. This is an area that has serious impact on local produce.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your prescription is absolutely spot on. We need to be self-reliant. We need to be looking to other African countries. If Ghana can't produce, we need to be looking to Kenya. We need to find ways to trade amongst ourselves and grow our countries, grow our economies. So the question you raised earlier was looking at public spending.
Yeah.
And it's not just a question of whether there's public spending or not, but what are we investing in? Where is that money actually going, and what return on investment is the country enjoying with that expenditure? So not only do you have the challenges of having to negotiate with world banks and the IMFs and those global players, but also holding our own governments to account to make sure they're leading us in the direction that we want to be going.
It's the case then the lack of accountability from the people towards their governments.
John, is when other institutions from the West realized governments in Africa, some of them were corrupt, they tended to shift and they preferred funding organizations, NGOs especially, directly. Why? Because they thought we can't count on the governments because they are corrupt. They are given money, it just disappears, doesn't help the people. If you talk about trickle-down economy, it doesn't go down, it stays at the top. So the guys at the bottom have nothing to eat. Now, the thing is, when you talk about what matters most in Africa right now, is the idea that institutions, governments need to fund brilliant ideas for the youths of Africa to innovate. I always advocate for youths in Africa because they are the future. Look at it this way. If, for example, in Africa-wide, we are this wonderful hub of innovations, and they are all patented, so no copyright theft. And those ideas are kind of head-handed, and they are funded. How far can we go? So far as a continent, we can really, really change so much. And when you look into our governments now, again, it's political. They thought, IMF, World Bank, preconditions, we don't want to deal with you. We are going east. And they discovered China. Now, the problem we have China, the Chinese loans are like Shylock loans, right? They are ruthless. They don't joke around. If you don't pay back, they'll take you to the airport. As a country. Yeah. That's how bad they are. And therefore, how do we liberate ourselves as Africans? Our focus lies on the ideology of self-reliance.
Yeah.
And also funding innovations by youth. Especially government deliberately deciding we are going to do it. Having some form of structure from across Africa, if they are brilliant ideas, why don't even get money and fund them? Like African Bank, fund the best idea in Africa. But we need coordination. We need to work together so that you see as a continent, we are not doing each one their own thing. Because if you are running marathon and each one runs for himself, some win, some lose. But if we run together, we win.
But the thing is, Kofi, this was research done by, I think it was the World Bank. By the year 2030, the increment in the global population would take place across the continent of Africa.
Absolutely.
Now, there's an opportunity there.
Huge.
However, if you look at what is happening across the continent now, there is an argument that's saying that if we're not careful, that we might actually miss the boat?
Well, every opportunity, there's opportunities for success and failure. But I think the wins are behind us. If we look at where we've come as nations, significant progress. And just having lived in Ghana for 20 years, been on the continent, seeing the direction, yeah, there's going to be bumps in the road. But there are sharp people, and they're committed to making the places they live better. So right now, with the CD decline, it's heartbreaking to watch. But you give me, I'm always betting on Ghana. 2 years out, a year out, you're going to see people making money, and people are still flooding in. If you're at the airport in Nairobi, and you're at the airport in Accra, you see people from all over the world. Exactly. They are not there for charity. They're making money. They see a growing market opportunity. They see people with potential, and they also know that, look at the population decline in the West. Aging population, where's the money going to come from?
Well,
to look after these older people.
Okay.
And so they know that this is really where the action is going to be.
All right, and that takes me to our next question. Many people in the diaspora would like to go back to help the development of their respective countries, but how can we actually help? Let's take a quick listen to this report. When we come back, we will talk more.
It's a question of Jamaicans being willing to go back home with their skills and knowledge, possibly train, teach people, because unfortunately there's a lot of mistrust with Jamaicans over here and Jamaicans back home, so to speak, in terms of finances. And we need to build up on a lot of unity and trust amongst each other. And I think the only way that can happen to make a difference is for Jamaicans to go over there and to support them financially, but to also train them.
I mean, at the end, it's about realizing what's happened and why they're in the why those countries are in the situations that they are. And because a lot of people, I mean, they seem to move to England, they move to America in hopes of finding a better life, which is understandable, and you can't blame them for it. But a lot of people also don't seem to want to acknowledge the fact that the reason why, I mean, even words like underdeveloped and the language that we use is very much constructed to put down these places. I mean, words like third world and underdeveloped, they're very, I mean, European-centric, to say the least. And so, I mean, it's about people sort of taking pride in where they come from and being willing to work with the people in their community to strive for that better place, instead of all these people calling for American intervention or British intervention. It's not going to help. You need your own people to help your own country, really, in the end. And people don't seem to realize that those attempts have always been thwarted by those same powers. I mean, America has assassinated how many African leaders just because they were progressive and they were left-leaning,
One of the issues that we have as Jamaicans over here is that there tends to be a misconception with Jamaicans back home. They believe that the grass is much greener over here and that we are, financially wealthy. And, as a result of that, there's been sort of like a lot of distrust, as I mentioned earlier on. And, what Jamaicans back home need to realise is that the struggle over here is real. A lot of people are still struggling now, and the grass is far from green. And we've got bills to pay, and we've got, a lot of finances and bills to deal with. So, like I says, until Jamaicans back home understand our struggle, then we can unite and work together.
The tendency is for politics to get involved and capitalism to get involved, and I would rather see efforts made where you're helping developing countries to help themselves rather than just plough money into the hands of big business or whatever.
Yeah. Let me come to you first, Kofi, because you made that transition, right? Read your portfolio, born and raised in the U.S. Is it New Orleans? Ohio? Cleveland, that's it. Then you decided to go to Ghana. You threw yourself into the deep end, right? And 20 years down the line, you've been able to build a portfolio for yourself within the property industry. And some have argued, the likes of the Vice President of Ghana has always said that diaspora is actually a big key to the development of nations. Your experience, how have you found it? Because as the woman said there, although she's Jamaican, she's talking about Jamaica and the lack of trust, lack of infrastructure, because we're kind of used to, you know, things being quote unquote being done properly here.
Sure. I think sometimes we've allowed our thinking to be too influenced by the West. I'll
Sure.
give you a great example. When you have a Chinese investor who arrives in Africa and they see a power grid that is a bit spotty, and they see some roads that need work, and they see a big population, for them, see an opportunity, because that's what China looked like 30 years ago. And they know what it's like for an economy to go from 0 to 60. When you've got a British person or an American and they step foot in a West African country and they're looking at a dusty road, they're saying, I don't really know how to operate in this situation. So we as Africans need to believe in the opportunity and also to co-create it. So it's not required for every person in the diaspora to get on a plane and move. That was my experience, and it's been a good journey. But if you're looking at the connectivity and the opportunity, I think there's huge opportunities for the diaspora to play a very important role in these wealthy financial centers that they live in. I'll give you a quick example. So Ghana and Ivory Coast, we export 70% of the world's cocoa. And we complain about the price that we're getting. Why are we not selling that cocoa to companies in the diaspora who are processing? What West African is involved in that business? 70% of the global trade. And can you think of anybody who's actually involved in cocoa processing in the West where the demand actually is? Yeah, there's a few processors in Ghana. But we can't complain about Cadbury's when we're not prepared to risk our own money and say, you know what, Jones has this great idea. He's hired this guy. Let's put some money behind him. He's processing, he's producing chocolate. Chocolate should be an African product. It shouldn't be, we think of it as, if you're in Europe, you think of it as Swiss. What part of this is Swiss? Vanilla comes from Madagascar. The sugar comes from the Caribbean. The cacao all comes from West Africa. There's nothing Swiss about this. So I think there's huge opportunities. It's about organization. The more organized society, the more organized people win.
Is it an issue of mindset? Because a lot of the times when we talk about these issues, especially from the point of view of diasporans, you know, we tend to talk about the mindset of our brothers and sisters back home. Is it an issue of mindset for, you know, people in the diaspora?
No, it's not. The thing is, I've covered diaspora many years, and there are those who have tried to get into some ventures in Africa on the ground, and their hands were burned. Of course, you can't rule out that sending money home for any particular project. You get honest people. Sometimes others are unfortunate. They get dishonest people, so they become a milking cow, and their project will not materialize. I've got so many examples of people I've interviewed that they went through bad experience, but that is not the story. No. The story is that you can, if you really want to do something, there are challenges wherever you are. You're gonna fall, but when you fall, you rise up and you keep going, and you succeed. I've come across actually a friend of mine, Kane, and he started to build an institution, but the first experience was not great. But he kept, you lose money, but you keep going until you achieve your goal. So the best thing to approach it, I've good advice of people who have tried. They're like, if you want to do a project, when you're doing your own budgeting, right? Put some extra money above, like a buffer zone. And the money that you wouldn't care if it's gone. And it's like part of your budgeting. You know, if you approach it that way, you do project in Africa. But there are cases where people are lucky. You are dealing with honest people. I've dealt with honest people, dealt with my own brother, 100% honest, and I've done things successfully. And that's a story for also other people. But again, when you are trying to invest in Africa, you have to, at every step, do due diligence for yourself and calculate the risk. Ask yourself, is it really worth it? Is it a calculated risk, or is it a risk born out of ignorance, which you can avoid? You have to be careful how you do things in Africa, because I've got people who buy things that are not there, right? Another friend I know, somebody sold to him a sewer. And how did it happen? Quick, you are here, you're like, oh, you're from London, yeah. Going back, yeah, we are selling this, yeah. And you know, when it rains, on top of a sewer cement, there's sand that comes and grass grows. They said, that plot there, how much is given price? And in a minute, it's like, you have to make down payment if you want to keep it before you go. He parts with money. The day after, he comes to meet with these guys and, wow, okay. Someone says, you bought that? I said, yeah. Why would you buy a sewer?
But I want to come to you, Kofi, because obviously you're a testament to coming from the diaspora and going there and being able to make things happen. And again, when we have these type of conversations, the first thing that comes to mind is lack of accountability, from institutions. And people want to invest. It's not that people don't want to invest. People want to invest. But A is accountability. And should anything happen, who do you go to? And is your money secured? And this has been, the bone of contention. Because we have ministers, governments, officials that come in here trying to encourage diasporans to go back. But that has always been the issue with diasporans. And I want to know your experience.
Well, I think we have to put this in context. Where is it that you can invest risk-free? You have a situation in the U.S., I remember fairly recently, where former president of NASDAQ, which is one of their exchanges, was involved in a fraud, Bernie Madoff, which was $50 billion. At the time, was close to the GDP of Ghana. Right? So 30 million Ghanaians, all of our economic activity for a year, gone. Do we say that America's a risky place to be? Right? There are risks. We just saw that the cryptocurrency exchange imploded.
Yeah.
Right? How many people lost millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars? There's loss. The question is, what is the alternative? And also, who is going to build the society in Ghana, if not us? Right? Or on the continent? If we're not part of that story, don't expect to get on to the throne once you've abdicated. Like, nobody is going to build it for us and say, once it's done, come and enjoy it. No. When things weren't comfortable in London, and there were bombs going off, they didn't all run to Accra where it was warm and safe. They fought, they protected their homeland, they enjoyed the benefits. If we're not prepared to make that sacrifice, don't expect the upside. And I don't think it needs to be altruism. It's about being in a position where you can look after your family and create opportunities and have a society you're proud of, because you're a second-class citizen if you're not on the continent.
I feel like I can listen to Kofi all the time. And
it's true though, what he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, by just listening to what we're having here, I don't know whether we've been indoctrinated to just think that nothing works across the continent. We'll go back to our respective countries, nothing ever works. But, the Chinese, for instance, are going there and making things happen. And I was having a conversation with another journalist the other day, and he also covered extensively across the continent. And of course, the lack of infrastructure in place. And I was saying to him, look, there's this policy, the AFCFTA, right, which I think, and Julius as well, think that it's a fantastic policy. And if it's implemented, would help. And he was so adamant, saying, yes, that is fine, but you need to look at our leaders in position, not being able to create a conducive environment for people to come in there and invest. I understand as a businessman, there is a probability of you losing your businesses, right? Losing your money or whatnot. But again, it's the fear. So my question is, why is there this kind of fear within us from going back?
Yeah, the thing is, Jonas, it's not fair to think everyone is the same. Talk about diaspora, you find they're all different people. There are those who have ruled out ever going back, and they've settled in their respective countries. And they're not planning to go back to Africa, all right? And they're still diaspora. They're planned to buy a pet. There's another man or woman who said, instead of buying a pet to walk it, I'm going to buy a farm in Africa, plant some nice fruits. That walk, I'll be harvesting my fruits and eating them. People are different, and it depends on whom you listen to. While we are busy being negative and fearful, a Chinese man who doesn't speak the language landed in Africa and invested, still without understanding the language. I can give you so many examples, like the building of Kenya's new rail from Mombasa to Nairobi, the capital city, the train, SGR rail they call it. The Chinese who were there, they couldn't even speak Swahili. They couldn't even speak English. And they were working with the Kenyans who couldn't speak Chinese either, right? They worked together and the rail was built. You here in diaspora, you can speak the language, but you are fearful. It's the wrong mindset for diaspora to have. Because I'm saying this, even if you don't plan to go back to Africa, there's nothing wrong for you to invest to support your country. So you have to overcome that fear.
And I'll leave the last 2 minutes for you, because I know that you've you built, is it Ayi Mensa? It's a park, right?
It's actually a community scale townhouse development, so 200 units. Geared, a lot of our buyers are diasporians.
Yes.
So it's probably upper middle market, so $200,000 units roughly, and we've sold out about 2 years ago.
And you sold out about 2 years ago. Fantastic. And then when you did, encounter diasporans who were interested in those properties, what are some of the things that they were saying?
In terms of the response?
The response, to properties?
Well, it was all very positive. We were delivering a good, high-quality product, and people enjoyed to see the uniformity. They liked the amenities that it offered. It was very much an American-inspired vision, where you've got a large central park that you can walk on, and there's security. And we're trying to actually bring that same model to our current development, which is Pokwasi Heights, but we're pitching that at a much lower price point, so $55,000 for a 2-bedroom expandable unit.
So it's not that diasporans don't want to go back to invest, they do, but they want something that is of quality, high standard, and again, assurance.
Yeah, and that assurance no one will ever give you, because because at the end of the day, any particular form of a journey is a personal decision, and when you make that decision, you pursue your dream, and one day you achieve it. There's nothing, no one can guarantee you success, no one can guarantee you things will be okay, but that doesn't stop you from doing that. I say again, I'm saying from Kenya, we have seen huge chunk of diaspora doing massive things. They're coming together in groups, we call them circles, and you see them building estates, and each owns a house or something like that. I'm speaking to you right now in Kenya, you have what they call DUT, Diaspora University Town. Are Kenyans who have decided to build a whole town with a university, with actually a biotech plant to begin to manufacture drugs on the ground, the same town with housing projects. Diaspora University Town, building a fresh new town. That's the level that they are in. So when we talk about a gentleman who wants to go and buy some fish in Peckham and they are afraid, stop eating the fish. Maybe eat chips.
And last words to you, Kofi. Anybody watching us is hesitant to go back?
Well, again, I think we create our own weather. If you look at the consumer confidence price index, people look at, are people feeling confident? If you have the confidence and you've got the numbers behind you, and we do, we very quickly change our reality.
Well, Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the show today. And thank you for watching. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show, but I'm sure you got something from the show today. All being well, we'll be back here, same time, same place next week. Until then, it's goodbye from us.
I am so hungry. This aroma to kill me. Go and get Grandpa's dinner.
Okay.
Whether you're looking for poundo in your crayfish stock, all-purpose seasoning, or any other ingredient, Tropical Sun has everything you need.
Hey, no. Take the pounded yam. My strong young man.
My hero.
Hey.
I think Mommy's a real hero.
Tropical Sun, flavors of the world to your table.
Leatherback helps you move your money securely from one country to another with ease.